All right, why don't we go ahead and get started? Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Agustina Behringer, and I am the Chief Medical Officer with Heart to Heart International. It's a pleasure to be here tonight, and I'm very happy to be joined here. Welcome to our panelists, and some of our staff are present as well. A little background on our organization. Heart to Heart International is a global humanitarian organization focused on improving access to healthcare. We have been in operation since 1992 and are headquartered in Lenexa, Kansas, which is outside of Kansas City. We respond to natural disasters all over the world by deploying volunteers to provide direct patient care to the populations affected by disasters, as well as supporting the survivors and organizations in those areas with supplies and equipment. We also have some programs, supporting our local Kansas City community. Currently, we're operating a clinic at a homeless assistant campus and then an emergency cold weather shelter for the population suffering from homelessness. We are responding to the COVID-19 pandemic by providing free testing to vulnerable populations and are in the process of setting up vaccination clinics as well. And again, we've supported a lot of local organizations with lots of supplies, for example, PPE. Tonight's webinar is an introduction to the role of volunteers in the disaster relief team. We have the opportunity tonight to hear from three of our most experienced volunteers. We have Dr. Jean Anderson Swayze, Dr. Jeffrey Alpert, and RN Sheila Morrison. After the discussion with the panelists, we will have a Q&A session and we can address any questions from the audience. So I will ask you to go ahead and type your questions into the Q&A function at the bottom of your Zoom screen. All right, let's get started. So panelists, could you each tell me what first made you interested in volunteering and how many deployments have you been on? Jean, we'll start with you.
Okay, I'll go first. I'm Jean Anderson Swayze. I'm a family doctor in Vermont. I'm an independent family physician. And I first got interested in volunteering right after residency when I responded with in a small group to the aftermath of the earthquake in Haiti. And for those of you who have followed that disaster, there was a huge response, but it was really quite chaotic and disorganized. And after returning from that trip, me and many others thought there was probably a better way to go about doing things. And a few years later, when I was volunteering for the Ebola response in Sierra Leone, I met a volunteer who told me about Heart to Heart International. And subsequently, I responded with Heart to Heart to Hurricane Harvey and in Houston, to Puerto Rico after Hurricane Maria. I've also responded to several other hurricanes and went down to New York City for COVID response last year.
Great. Dr. Alpert, how about yourself?
Yeah, I am a family physician boarded, and I live in Denver. I do a lot of emergency room work in the mountains, in various places. I was always interested in volunteering and sort of have a travel wanderlust my whole life, thanks to my parents. I first did 2 educational trips with Heart to Heart to China in 2005 and 2006. And then, like Jean, got started after the Haiti earthquake. I was on the first team in, we were there. Well, we tried again, we got there about 5 days after the earthquake. And I've been to Haiti 8 times over the years, mostly earthquake related. Then there was another hurricane, 16, 17. I've been to the Philippines, Nepal with Heart to Heart, then Houston with Harvey, and then also in New York last April. So quite a few trips.
And Sheila, how about yourself?
I must tell you that humanitarian was not my first thought to become a disaster responder. I retired from nursing, and I thought, oh boy, I need an adventure. So I did sign up for disaster response, and went off to my first big adventure with the Red Cross. So I really went for my own selfish reasons for an adventure. But the best thing that happened was when I got where I was going, the people needed what I had, not just what I had, but what my group had. And that's what's kept me coming back with the Red Cross and Heart to Heart. I've deployed 20 times. I've been in most of the hurricane and flood and tornado states, some of them twice. I've been to the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Saipan, and the Bahamas with Heart to Heart. So I have a good time, and I like to think that the people are glad to see me and the team coming.
We're always very happy to have all three of you. Let's talk about, why don't you each walk us through a typical day of your deployment experience? So again, Dr. Anderson Swayze, we'll start with you.
Well, I think that's a trick question because really there is no typical day. And that's one thing that volunteers quickly learn is that every trip is different and every day is different. Starting from, the moment that you commit to going to the disaster, the means by which you get there is often quite unique. I've had fellow disaster response members arrive by ship, helicopter, train. Well, actually, I don't know about train, but cars, hiking into places. So the adventure really starts there. Usually, the great thing about it is there's always a logistics team an advanced team that goes ahead. And so they've done all the prep work. So when you arrive at your destination, you're not the one that's figuring out where you're going to be sleeping, where there's going to be food. That's all set up for you, which is really, you get to arrive and do your role, whether it be medical or logistics. And so that takes some of the stress out of it. A typical day might begin with just finding out what the plan for the day is. And usually there's a team lead who will run you through where you're going to be that day, whether it's going to be at a clinic, an established clinic filling in, or if you're going to be part of a mobile clinic and doing some outreach. And usually we'll see patients, try to grab some food somewhere along the way. It's kind of, just seeing patients in a variety of different situations, whether it's in a clinic or under a tree. And then the team usually gets together for a dinner. And at that point, there's a debriefing where we kind of run through what happened during the day, what went well, what didn't go well, what could be improved on. And then there's a discussion of what the next day might look like. And usually kind of an update on the situation, the unfolding disaster situation and kind of where we're fitting in that big picture.
Yeah, Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah. Since most of my experiences have been in the tropical areas other than Nepal and I guess New York, and it gets hot very, very early, you're up quite early. And since there's often no electricity where we're at, the day ends at a fairly early hour, 4 or 5, because once it gets dark, transportation becomes an issue, safety becomes an issue to some degree. But I agree with Jean, there's no typical day. I'd like to say we start seeing patients, but I've seen patients under trees on the beach in Haiti, which was awfully nice. But that's once in the National Stadium in Haiti, where we were the first week after the earthquake, with multiple other medical teams. Sometimes in established clinics, but usually we're there because the medical infrastructure is gone and and often wasn't there in the first place. You know, you just work. Usually we'll try and take a little 20, 30 minutes to have whatever lunch, whatever we've brought. Sometimes the locals will feed us. But it usually ends 4 or 5, and then we get back to where we're staying. And again, we have the meeting, as Jean mentioned, and usually get to bed fairly early. Again, there's often no electricity, and that's more the rule than the exception, I think.
And Sheila, what about a typical day in your experience?
Well, I will tell you a typical day because I was recently in the Bahamas. We would climb into the pickup truck around 7:45 and head to clinic. Clinic was a little concrete block structure building that had withstood the 240-mile-an-hour winds. Everything else was flatness and destruction, but we had a little clinic. If we had been on outreach the day before or the night before, our morning would be restocking our supplies and medicines. We gave away hundreds and hundreds of medicines, but Heart to Heart just kept supplying us with thousands and thousands. So we were always ahead of the game on medicines. We would see patients in the clinic. There would generally be 2 nurses and a physician. We would see clients till around 2 o'clock. Everyone came in with a baseline, without exception, a baseline of diabetes and hypertension. Been without meds for days or weeks. So we would treat their chronic conditions, and we would also be seeing the respiratory conditions from the mold, the flooding. We would be seeing the diabetic wounds from people wading through the floodwaters and getting the tiniest scratch. And if you've been in disaster, you know that the tiniest scratch in floodwater can often lead to terrible, terrible wounds and the loss of a limb. So until about 2 o'clock, we would see clients. We would grab some lunch, scavenge lunch, really. Maybe there was a donated food room, and if we could probably come up with a granola bar and a bottle of water. Around 2 o'clock, we would head out again to outreach, load up the truck. The first outreach I did in Bahamas was with Jean, who's here on the screen. I haven't seen her since, but we went out in the pickup truck. I was triage. I stood at the front of the truck leaning against the hood with my clipboard, got all the information. What's your name and how old are you? Then I did my nursing assessment and wrote it down. Leg hurts. I would send the client around to the front of the truck, to the other side. Roger would reach into the driver's side window, check if they had signed permission, if the client had signed permission, which was oftentimes an X. He would give a tetanus shot. Then he would send the client around to the back of the truck where Jean was standing in the dirt, in the road, in the middle of the jungle, with the sun beating down and the bugs biting our legs. You received an average of 1,000 bug bites an hour on your legs. It was quite dreadful. If
Wasn't that bad, Sheila?
we would do this every day, we would see clinics, people in the road. There was nothing where we went. There was rubble and trees, but yet when the truck pulled up, the people came out. And we would make clinic for them. And we would go to the churches where the people were sleeping on the benches and on the floors, and they would make a space in the middle for us. We would go to shelters. We would find a place where maybe a wall was standing where we could get out of the heat for a little while. Then if we were lucky, there was a little place on Abaco called a Blue Hole, which was one of those wonderful deep limestone sinkholes that you see on the nature shows when they fly over Central America. And there's a beautiful blue circle down below, and we would jump in there and get cooled off, head home to our dark, pitch black house, and hit the sack and get up the next day to start it all over again. That was a typical day.
Thank you. Well, responding to sudden onset disasters specifically poses a lot of challenges. How would you all say that you prepare for a deployment, and especially how do you maintain that readiness, knowing that you can be asked to deploy with extremely short notice, sometimes as little as a day or two?
Well, I'll start first. I have to admit I'm a bit of a weather hound. So So my preparation starts just by monitoring the news and, you know, looking at hurricanes and following the news and trying to anticipate things. And I'm fortunate that I work in an independent practice and at a small practice. And so if I have the sense that there's an unfolding disaster, I typically start looking at my schedule in advance and sort of telling my husband how serious things are and sort of kind of doing some groundwork to get the permission that I need from not only from my family, but also my colleagues at work who always are very supportive. So just keeping an eye on the news is helpful just in terms of kind of having that mindset that you might need to go and sort of looking ahead at your calendar to figure out whether, you know, can you do this from family logistics, but also work logistics standpoint. And then Heart to Heart is great because they send out bulletins to folks on the disaster response team saying, hey, we're monitoring this situation and, you know, there may be a need, or, hey, we're sending out an advance team, you know, you may be needed, you may not, but, you know, time to start thinking about things. So they do a very good job of keeping us in the loop and enabling us to sort of do some forward thinking. And in terms of just being able to kind of leave suddenly, I do have a bag of tropical weight clothing, and you know, it's got earplugs in there and an eye mask and bug dope and sunscreen and all the things that you might need to be able to respond to a disaster. I actually have a checklist that a volunteer shared with me that she had, which was great and very comprehensive, that I use. Heart to Heart will send out a checklist of things to bring and is very good about communicating exactly, do you need to bring, you know, a sleeping bag. They have these great backpacks that have everything you need in it in terms of like setting up your own little mini campsite. There's a tent in there, there's there's a sleeping bag, there's MREs and your own spoon and fork and stuff like that, and flashlight. So you don't need to bring that kind of stuff because that's all part of the backpack that you get. So you just really need to bring clothing and your own medications and stuff like that. And there's a list that gets sent along. So that's very useful.
Well, Jean took a lot of my input, of course. I have 2 shelves in a closet where I have the medical supplies I bring, mostly personal stuff that I can use. Although usually we're well supplied, but I have a tent, sleeping bag, mosquito netting, and then, you know, I have medications, you know, usually malaria prophylaxis, nausea medicines for personal and, you know, for team use. And, you know, if I'm called to go, I usually will run around and bring snacks because even though you folks try and supply, it's not always as easy as it may seem. No chocolate because that will melt. Learned that the hard way. Yeah, I mean, I can be ready in a day. I mean, I've kind of learned and refined it over the years. But the checklist helps because it's always something that you forget, you know, batteries or, you know, little things that will help you sleep. But every situation is different. So bring the basics and just hope I can MacGyver the rest. So.
Sheila, what about you?
Logistically, I have it much easier than the other panelists and many people. I live by myself. I have no pets. A gentleman a few houses down has a key to my house, will watch my house and my yard. Most people will say, oh, I bet you keep your suitcase packed. No, I've been on about 20 deployments. My time that I set to pack is about 12 minutes. I know what I need. The list is in my head. The thing that I would give some advice about is your toiletries bag. This is the thing. You can never say my toiletries are ready. In the morning, I just have to grab my toothbrush and my deodorant. Don't do it. Have your bag ready. Have duplicates, have triplicates. If Heather called me tonight and said, can you go to Honduras tomorrow? I would just need to pick up my toiletries bag and put it in my suitcase and never give it another thought. So I have toiletries advice and attitude advice. My attitude is I can't wait to go on an adventure. I can't wait to go where the people need what our team has to give them. So that's my motto. That's my heart-to-heart motto. Toiletries and waiting
Spirit.
for the adventure.
Love it. A couple other things that I'll add to that is certainly have your passport, available and updated at all times, although we do domestic responses, of course, as well. And then personally, I keep an extra month of my own personal medications just in case. And those are also my duplicates. And as Jeff mentioned, sometimes you need malaria prophylaxis and whatnot. We do send a pre-deployment brief that will let you know what is needed for travel as far as vaccinations and your own personal health. Moving on to our next question. What is a particular moment or incident that has stuck with you from a deployment, and what did you learn from it?
Okay, well, there's so many. I don't have one particular moment because each deployment has its own unique flavor to it. And so I could talk at length about each deployment and the stories from that trip. But I have to say that the thing that really makes each trip special, not only is it serving the people who we go to treat, but it's working with fellow volunteers, and that's always just such a wonderful bonus. Is meeting the fellow members of the team who come from all over the country, and actually Canada too. And you just get to meet people who have a similar passion about doing this type of work. And that's really always just such a rewarding part of it. I'm looking at George's picture right there, getting off the boat in after Hurricane Dorian. And it was just such a privilege to be able to meet him and work alongside of him. He's a longstanding heart-to-heart volunteer who is a family doctor. And I learned so much from him. You learn so much from the other volunteers, and how to improvise in challenging situations. And so that's one of the things that sticks with me from every deployment is the team that you get to work with.
Great, Jeff.
I would.
What say you?
I would agree 1,000%. I'm still rather close to people that I met that first week in Haiti, the Philippines, just everywhere. We keep, and if I'm in their town or close by, we'll get together. You're with these people 24/7, living, working together for 2-3 weeks, and under stressful conditions, but you bond incredibly closely. They're probably one of the most memorable experiences was in the mountains of Nepal. We just set up tent city basically for us, and these Polish doctors and nurses came through on motorcycles bringing medical equipment. They left us a ton of equipment, which was incredible, things that we didn't have. But they also brought their own vodka and Polish Nutella and crackers, and we were up maybe not half the night, but for many hours, just enjoying their company. So
Definitely we definitely bond and make friends for a lifetime.
Yeah.
Sheila, what about you?
The team is the important aspect of the trip, but since you said what's memorable for me, I'm going to tell you that the blue hole was memorable, because how many people get to say they jumped in a blue hole a bunch of times? I'm going to say that when I was in Saipan with the Red Cross on a deserted, quiet day with nobody around, I got to walk up the path and stand on the top of the cliffs where the Japanese women had jumped into the ocean with their babies under their arms, because their commanders had told them, when the Americans come, they will rape your wives and eat your children.
Mm.
And a beautiful sunlit day, blue sky, 5,000 miles of sparkling Pacific Ocean. Beautiful, beautiful, all by myself. But the weight, the emotion, the atmosphere at the top of the cliff on your heart and on your chest is one of those places in the world that keep the emotion of the events. And if you've never experienced one, it can't really be described, but it happens. And I want to say that in the Bahamas, women, I'll speak for all women of the Bahamas, would come to us and sit down on a rickety chair in the rubble, in the cement, on the broken glass and the sticks and the nails. And the women would sit down on knee to us on these rickety chairs, or even overturned milk crates. And these women had been living with death and destruction and loss for days and weeks and months, and loss was their environment. And I would try to lean in and create a moment for these women, for this woman. And the gift that I would receive back was that the woman would lean in and take the moment that I had given her and use it to lean in and tell me her story. And that was a gift to me and to us. And the blue hole and the suicide cliffs in Saipan and the women in the Bahamas don't have too much anything in common, but they were examples of grace that the universe gave to me personally, because I took a step into the unknown. And anyone, if you are going to be with Heart to Heart or another organization, and if you take that step into the unknown, these gifts will come to you. Your gifts will be different than my gifts, but this is where you'll keep your gifts. And this is what you'll have to bring out when someone says to you, what was memorable about your experience?
Wow, thank you so much for those really powerful stories. If we had to ask, what general parting words of advice would you provide to someone who's considering becoming a volunteer, specifically with Heart to Heart, but just in general?
Well, I'll start off. I think that we've kind of talked about all the wonderful things and how much great, what a good time we have and how rewarding it is to be on the disaster response team. But I also think it's important to know that the deployments are tough. You see hard things. You have to leave behind difficult situations. There are situations where sometimes they're beyond our capabilities to make a significant difference in. You need to have a lot of flexibility. Often the plan changes from day to day, and that requires a lot of patience. So if you're someone who, is type A, you're going to need to do a lot of mindfulness meditation because the plan does change, and that's just the nature of it. These are very fluid, dynamic situations, and to a certain extent, that's just the nature of it. But if you're willing to kind of give up that part of the control and just kind of go with the flow, you're going to really have a very rewarding experience.
Yeah, I would echo what Jean said. when I saw this question, what occurred to me is I'm not totally type A, but I'm approaching it. And the one thing I've learned in these deployments is whatever plan was made will change 50% of the time. Transportation will be difficult, impossible sometimes. And that's taken some learning. It can be frustrating. You just have to learn to go with it. In Haiti, we won a 4-hour trip 20 miles from Léogâne, which was the epicenter of the earthquake, to Port-au-Prince, where we were staying sometimes. It's taken 8 hours at times, but that was, you just get used to it. 4 hours was common. They'd have protests. They'd block the roads. It's common there to set fire to tires. Haiti is a wonderful place. The people are wonderful, but it's a real human tragedy, and it was that way even before the earthquake. But I think it's patience. Is, it may take you 3 days to get to where you want to go, even once you're in the country. I've ridden helicopters, boats, trucks that would never pass inspection in the US, on roads that would never pass. Just terrifying, but I'm still here, so.
We do take safety very, very seriously.
No
But you're right. Going with the flow is a very important quality. Sheila, what about you? What general advice would you give?
I'm going to talk about flexibility, as Jean and Jeff did, but I want to say, especially to the people who are going to come to Heart and train, and anyone else who's listening, which we're very happy to have. I was lucky enough to go to Kansas and meet in person, and I was with an 8-person team. We had 6 teams, 6 tables of 8 people each, and that was in person. Our training from now on is going to be Zoom, and maybe other training programs will be Zoom. Well, we're all kind of tired of Zoom meetings and, oh, this person's talking or that person's talking. But I want to say to you, when you do your heart-to-heart training or other team training on Zoom, look at the people who are on your team and listen to what they have to say, because chances are good you're either going to travel with them or you're going to meet them in the field when you get where you're going. And if you've taken the time to look and learn these people, you'll say, oh, I know that guy. I heard wisdom coming from him during our training. And oh, I know her. She seems to have a lot of common sense. And this will give you a confidence that your team has you and you have your team. And Heart to Heart is all about team building. So don't just fluff off people because they're on the screen. Pay attention to them and get to know them, because they're going to be very important to you and you're going to be important to them. As far as flexibility, when we went to Abaco, I had no expectation. We didn't know that we weren't going to have, I suppose I should have thought of it. I didn't know we weren't going to have electricity or running water, but we made clinic happen without water, without electricity. We made outreach happen. We made it in the dirt. We made it happen. We made it in the churches. We made it happen. We made it at home. Our house was pitch black. The storm shutters were all on all the windows and doors. Our house was pitch black from 6 o'clock at night, but we made team happen. And that's important. Don't go with expectations. If you go with an expectation, that can lead to a disappointment, and a disappointment can lead to resentment, and resentment can lead to a disruption in the team. And team, when you're far away, the team is all important. You should be like one organism. So be flexible, work with what you have, and create the opportunity for the people who have been harmed to begin their recovery.
Wow, thank you so much, Sheila. We have a question from the audience. Dr. Alpert, you deployed to Haiti with Heart to Heart numerous times in response to the 2010 earthquake. what brought you back so many times? And what I'm going to do, Jeff, is after you answer specifically about Haiti, I'll ask Jean and Sheila to tell us just in general, what keeps you coming back to deployments. So let's start with you, Jeff.
You know, as I mentioned, we were on the ground in Haiti 5 days after the earthquake, set up a clinic on just these long benches in the National Soccer Stadium with, you know, Doctors Without Borders. There was a team from Miami, and it was just patient after patient, some horrifying medical conditions. But there was no charting. You just saw people and took care of them. It was, you know, it's really why I went into medicine, you know, to take care of people. And it was such a discovery that, wow, this is, yeah, it was amazing and frustrating. I mean, you see conditions, people are going to die. And at that point, it was a triage situation where we could get children into sort of the hospitals, the, you know, the makeshift and the real, and the standing hospitals, but older people, you would do what you could, and that often wasn't enough. But so it was medicine in its purest form. Even now we do a little charting, but it's nothing compared to what we do in America, sitting on a computer half your day. And in Haiti, the people are just, I mean, they're wonderful. You just want to help and talk with them, and they want to work on their English, and you want to work on your Creole, which at least initially I did. It's a lot harder since I don't go very often anymore. But yeah, it's the people there. You know, they work so hard. It's really, I don't want to be negative, but it's sort of a broken country. But it's that whole political thing. But it's just, you know, it's why I went into medicine, is to help people, and it's not sit on a computer for hours. So.
Absolutely. How about Jean and Sheila? Obviously not specific to Haiti, but just what keeps you going back and again to do this crazy stuff?
Well, I'll go. Heart to Heart finds the patients in the disaster. So when I responded with Dorian, I literally got off the plane. I went right to the clinic, and there was a patient waiting for me. It was great. The advanced team had set it all up, and literally I just arrived and started seeing patients, and it was just amazing. Heart to Heart really does a great job of finding out what, you know, they do a needs assessment, and they get you to where the patients are. And as Jeff said, it's kind of it's the purest form of medicine. You get to see patients. There's some WHO paperwork that we fill out to make the bureaucrats happy, but it's you really are able to do good work. And the nice thing about it, as medical professionals, we don't have to think about the logistical stuff because there's the logistics part of the team. So we can just be there and do our medical stuff. And someone is thinking about food for us. Someone is thinking about where we're going to be sleeping, and that all part is taken care of. So we can really focus on taking care of the patients. And Heart to Heart does it really well. They also take care of the security part. And so that's what keeps me coming back, because it's time and time again, it's been a very rewarding experience that is win-win. Not only do I feel like I'm doing good work, but I often get way more out of it. I feel like when I come back that I feel so much, you know, I feel like I've had such a great experience time and time again.
And Sheila.
I could just repeat what Jean and Jeff said. I'll say that the Red Cross is a wonderful organization, but it's large and there's a lot of logistics, and people tend to cross into your lane. With heart to heart, with people, if there's too many people around in any organization, there's going to be a certain number of people telling each other how to do their jobs that aren't in their lanes. With heart to heart, everything is taken care of, and heart to heart says to me, go there. I made a place. Maybe it's out in the jungle. Maybe it's out in the woods. Go there and be a nurse. No one at Heart to Heart has ever told me how to be a nurse, made any suggestions about my care, question my judgment. Go there and be a nurse. Go there and be a physician. We've got it all covered. Go to this spot and do your thing. And that keeps me coming back to Heart to Heart.
I love that. Well, thank you so much to our wonderful panelists for sharing your experience and your words of wisdom. And thank you to all our participants for being here with us tonight. Hopefully we have you now excited to become a Heart to Heart volunteer. And so on the screen, we have the next steps. So if you are interested in joining the disaster response team, or if you know anybody else who would be a good fit, you can go to hearttoheart.org/volunteer. And Sarah Cooper, who is our volunteer coordinator, has put it in the chat as well, so you can click and save that. But that is all our time for tonight. I really want to thank all of you. Again, our panelists, huge thank you to you. And to all our participants, we hope that this will be just the first of many webinars for prospective volunteers. Feel free to share the link that will be on our social media if you know other people that would benefit from it. And we look forward to working with you all. Have a great night, everyone.
Good night, Augustina. Thank you, and thank you to everyone who came to hear us.
Good night.
Thank you.